Hi, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this tutorial we will begin to create our sword model. We will start with blocking out the model from the mood board I have created. So using a mood board is really useful because it helps with our creative process whilst also being used for reference, so everything can be done as realistic as possible. After looking around and thinking of what to make, I found this image. So this is an image of like a chain sword, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to create something like this, so we weren't just making a normal sword. Like, you can make a normal sword if you want. I kind of want to make something a bit more crazy and a bit, yeah, just something that's not just a sword, and this seems like it could be more fun. So you don't have to model this, you can create your own mood board and create your own model to fit over the top. This will probably cover a lot. Me modelling this will cover a lot of hard surface sort of techniques, and will get you really far in your hard surface modelling because there's quite a lot of little things on here. We won't be modelling this exact one. I'm going to be modelling it how I would create it in real life, because that's kind of like how I like to model things. When I model something, I would like to try and think if I could actually make this in real life. So this is why my mood board is like this. So this was kind of the idea that I want. And I was thinking, how would I actually make this? So it's a chainsword, so instantly went to chainsaws, and I was looking around, and yeah, you can get these chainsword bars which are long enough, which can be as long as this. Although this whole thing might be a bit heavier, but I think the general scheme of things, I think we can let that slide, because I think all these sort of fantasy or sort of over the top sword things may be a little bit too heavy, but let's not worry about that. So I like to kind of make things, say if I was to make this in real life, this is how I would approach it. This is how I'd try and make this. So I'd start off with obviously a chainsaw blade and bar, and this will give us most of our workings and stuff like this. And I've got some sort of ideas of how grungy I want it and sort of what my look. I don't want it to be super clean. This is just kind of probably the sword sort of thing. It's going to look a bit more dirtier than that. And we've got some little bits here to sort of show what it's going to be like. And I've also got some like reference of how the chain goes together, because we're going to go through and eventually model all these little bits and probably rig it as well. So all these little bits are going to be really important. I don't know if you can see that. That's right. We got some like sort of nuts and bolts stuff to how to like put it all together and attach it, and this could probably change. This is just like some random reference. So yeah, we've got this sort of longboard motor. So I was looking around, I was thinking, how would I actually power this thing? Like, having a big petrol motor on there would be like ridiculously heavy. You can model like that, but like say if I was going to do this in real life, I'd go straight to these sort of high powered sort of longboard motors, because they've got quite a lot of power in them, and the batteries last quite a long time. And you can sort of see how we can use these to power this blade on here, and we can sort of make up some sort of cogs and stuff and awesome bands to go around. So we've got some sort of ideas of the motor and stuff and how we'd power it. So these are the powers for like the skateboards, so the high sort of ampage battery packs. We've got a transformer here. I'm not sure if we actually need that. I just put that there because I thought maybe we might need it, but we probably won't. So this is my sort of mood board, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to block everything out because I've got all these references, and you can download all this reference as well. It's all in the download file. And I'm going to just start blocking out, because the most important thing about hard surface modeling is to block it out first. And we're also going to be using this as time to do like sort of concepting as well. So we're also blocking out and concepting at the same time. So I'm just going to close it. I'm just going to pull that off to the side. And I've still got my sword model open from our previous one. So this is where we finished creating it from the scan. So then we object tracked the sword. So now our next step is to build the sword. So our first step in building the sword is blocking out the model. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to hide this, and I'm going to bring in, it's going to go panels, orthographic, front. I'm going to go view, select camera, image plane, import image. What I'm doing, I'm just going to go to my reference folder. So you should have all these sword ref. Which one is it? So I'm going to use this one as my first piece of reference, because this is what my blade's going to be. And you see you've got all the reference in here that we can use, and the mood board. So I'm just going to open that, and now we can see that we've got this image on this image plane, and that's on our front camera. So at the moment, I'm not going to particularly worry about scale for this. I'm just going to come in, and I'm going to straight away, I'm just going to, I am going to actually select a cylinder. I'm just going to rotate this around 90 degrees. So I'm going to try and keep this as our sort of first sort of basic modeling, and we're going to work through. So I'm going to try and be as slow as possible. So all I've done is just created a cylinder for now. I'm just going to press R to sort of scale it down. And I'm just going to try and match this sort of shape. And if you can't quite see it, you can go to shading and wireframe. I'm just going to scale this down until that fits nicely in there. Let's say we're not doing anything. This is not going to be our final sort of model. This is just so we can block it out and sort of test the waters with it, sort of thing, and do our concepting. So now I've just gone to my poly cylinder, into my attribute editor, and I've just going to change my subdivisions axis down. I'm just going to right click and hold face. I'm going to select all these faces, then I'm just going to delete them. If I double click on this edge, this now selects the entire edge loop. If I press Ctrl E to extrude, I can move across using that one axis. Press R to scale up. I'm just going to use my translation and scale tool to sort of match this shape. So that's Ctrl E to extrude, and see how it goes into the sort of poly extrude edge window here. You can extrude out like this if you want, or you can press W and it goes to whatever orientation your manipulator is in. So I'm just going to keep extruding out and just do this entire chainsaw blade. So that's Ctrl E. I'm just going to press W. I'm just going to do it every so often so I do get that sort of, because there is a slight curve in it. I said we're only blocking it out, so it can be quite rough. Control E. Sorry about that, my dog was just barking. So we've done this sort of chainsaw bar, and I'm using Control E for my extruding, but you can go over here to your right. See where it says Modeling Toolkit? You have all your, pretty much most of the tools that you'll use for this entirety, and you'll learn like the keyboard shortcuts on the way. So I'll probably use this as well, so it's a bit easier for you to see actually, instead of me just using hotkeys. So we'll just go up through the top as well. So you can like hold right click on the screen and it'll open up this menu. You'll have your edge selection, your vertex selection, face, vertex, face, and UV, and all that as well. So I won't go through all of these. At the moment, we're only ever going to really worry at the moment about edge, vertex, and face. We might vertex face is really useful for splitting apart and checking you've not got any sort of double edges or some double extruded stuff by accident. But we'll mostly use our edge, vertex, and face, and our object mode, which just brings it back to this. And they're the same as our object mode, vertex mode, edge mode, poly face mode, and UV. So, and we've also got all these tools here, which at the moment all we've used is extrude. So what I'll do, I'm just going to go to my panels perspective, and you can see that it's still, if we get shading, smooth shade all, we can still see that this is still the thickness that we left it as. So what we can do, just select object mode, press R. We can just roughly scale it for now. Let's pull it over to one side. That looks fairly reasonable. So we're just blocking it out, which is like the first stage of hard surface modeling. So let's go back to our orthographic at front. And let's just have a look at this. And we can work on this a little bit better when we get to that point. We just want to get it blocked out so we can see it. So, get to panels perspective. We can see that we've got this basic blade, or just the chainsaw bar, sorry. And just for, and what we can do, if we hold, you can either hold right click and select face, or select face here. And all I'm just going to do, I'm going to select this polygon, hold Control and Shift, and double click. Now that selects the edge loop. And I'm just going to go extrude. And I'm just going to do this roughly. I just pulled it out by its local translate, or you can select on here. See how we can slide it here. You have your offset, which offsets it in the axis. But at the moment, we only need the local translate, because all we're going to do, I'm just going to sort of fake this chainsaw blade bit. So you can either use the local translate or select this tool here. And yeah, we're just doing something very basic at the moment. So if I go perspective, and I can hide this now. We can see we've got a rough chainsaw blade. It's probably some. We can fix this at another time. And if we unhide our sword, you can see our scale is a little bit. Our scale is a little bit too small. So let's scale this up. And rotate that around. Ooh. Let's rotate that around. So I'm just going to my channel box editor. I can just type in -90. And obviously, because we're concepting this at this point, you can pretty much do almost whatever you want. So we've got the length of the blade. The one thing that we are keeping is the handle, and we're only replacing this, the sort of this blade end, and maybe this part here. So we've kind of got this chainsaw blade, and I was kind of pondering the fact that like we can have one, but I think because I've made this sword so thick, it might not, unless I'm going to paint stuff out. I'm actually going to double this up. So my idea was to have this chainsaw blade. Now if I press Control D, that now duplicates it. So my plan was to have a sort of double chainsaw, or chainsword even. So if I just hide this, so we can sort of see what our blade's going to look like. And like, you don't have to do it like this. This is why we're sort of concepting this out, because it could end up being a really ugly looking thing, or it could be the greatest thing ever. Or it just might be awful. But this is why you always block it out, so you can concept it. So to cover up that sort of thickness of that sword, I'm going to sort of double blade this, but first to make it, I'm going to undo that, so Control Z. If I press Control 1, this now isolates it. That isolates the selection. And all I'm going to do is just going to select these faces actually. I'm going to select on both sides, press Control E. I'm just going to bring in a little bit of thickness. Just so I get that sort of, just so it looks a little bit like a chainsaw, I guess. But I'm not too bothered about any topology at the moment or anything like that. I'm just blocking it out. So I'm pressing Control 1. And I'm just going to push this to the side. One blade there. Control D. And another blade there. So it's probably going to be a bit of a ridiculous sword, but it should be quite good fun to make. And hopefully when it's finished it should look quite cool, even if it might be a bit unrealistic. But that's why we do VFX, right? So do the things that don't really exist. So I'm just going to hide this now. So I'm feeling that this is probably going to be what my blade's going to look like, roughly. So I'm probably going to have a look at my mood board again. So we've got this sort of chainsaw blade that we've roughed out. And we've got our motors and stuff. And our batteries. But what we've got to figure out is, how would we actually mount this to our sword blade? So I'm gonna hide this as well. I'm just gonna create a cube. Gonna scale it up. I'm actually gonna bring it to where the sword is. And I'm gonna sort of fake where this blade could be. I'm going to go to my modeling toolkit. Then I'm going to bring this in. I'm going to just pretend this is the blade now. And this is what I'd probably mount it to. So it's probably not going to be a full length one because these blades would be curved. So we could probably bring it back around here maybe. Then we can sort of figure out how we might be able to mount this to it. Because don't forget, we've also got to do all like the motors and electronics, but that is the whole point of this stage. It's just to figure out what we're going to do. So we've done that, so let's make some cylinders. Press E to rotate. Go to my channel box editor, just type in 90 degrees, so that's exactly 90 degrees. Then go to my tribute editor, go to my poly cylinder. I'm just going to bring down my subdivision axis until we've got the sort of bolt shape. And I'm just going to drag this up. I'm just going to scale it roughly to a bolt size shape. And I'm not too bothered that it's not looking like bolts at the moment, but I just want to sort of get that sort of idea of what's going on. Because this is going to help figure out what we actually need to model as well. So that's the sort of one of the best things about this. So if you block all your models out, you go straight to the point of what you need to model instead of just modeling stuff and realizing you don't need it. And we can sort of get a really good plan of how to build this sort of strange looking chain sword. So let's imagine that we've attached that. We've left this sort of space for the motors. So I don't know what goes on the other side, but we'll figure that out. So let's make another cylinder. And we can use these exact same ones, I think. We can use this sort of... They're quite short and stubby, so let's figure out how let's roughly model one of these. So the scale, we'll figure out the scaling size afterwards. Let's just rotate that round. So they are quite... So let's select that. And I'm just using those motors as reference. I'm going to right click, hold vertex, or you can go to your modeling toolkit. I'm just going to pull them off to the side a bit. Select my faces. Let's select all those faces. Hold control. And you can see when I hold control, I have a little minus on my cursor. And this means that this will deselect now. So I'm just going to press Control E for extrude. I can change my thickness. Then on my offset, I can change sort of bevel on it. And I can sort of get a rough idea of that sort of bevel on that motor. Doesn't have to be perfect at this point. So it's probably a little bit. So I'm just kind of, at the moment, I am just guesstimating the sort of sizes of this. So this is how we have to kind of plan out how this is going to work. So obviously, if we're doing this, our chain has to sort of be in line with this. It can't be at a funny angle. So let's actually select the face again and press extrude. And we can use offset. And press Control E again. And let's just pretend that's the... Press Control E again. I'm just gonna fake this sort of cog. Cool. So we've got this really basic looking motor thing. So we'll want to have it aligned to our chain. So this is the thing we've got to try and figure out is how we're going to get this to actually work. So the only thing that I can think of is if you have... Obviously it depends on how dangerous this thing is going to be as well, so I'm sure it's not going to be the best with health and safety, but we can... Not really going to worry about that at all. So our chain will have to go around there and up there. We can put the brackets, so if we now Control D and duplicate this. And what we get, because we can use 2. And what I'm going to do is just going to go channel box editor. And I want to flip this. I can either rotate this round like that, fairly simple. Just go -90 and that's flipped. I can go to my X translation. I can put a minus in there. And that should have flipped it. No, it was. That's not. That's my controls. Let's freeze that transform. That should. There we go. It's flipped now. So I flipped it that way. Now I can sort of figure out where I'm going to put this. So just going to line this motor up with that. So this is always a bit of a trial and error of what looks kind of nice and what kind of looks a bit bad. But this is why we're blocking it out. So if we've got this one powering this blade and this one powering that blade, it seems like an awfully big angle. So what we could do, actually, we could maybe have this mounted through or actually not. If I undo that, so I can actually, if I just select all this, I'm just going to bring the bar to the center. So now we've got some sort of equal length. We could put those right on top of each other. And we can sort of, I'm just going to make a cube. Okay, so I'm just going to scale this in one direction. Why is this not working? I'm just going to make a nasty reference of where the chain would go. Can duplicate that down. So I'm not worried that this kind of looks a bit funny. I just want to sort of get the rough idea. I'm sure there's probably loads of ways that you can do this, but I want to try and get through this sort of concepting as quick as possible. So I'm just going to select those two and press Control G to group them. I'm just going to call these motors. Then I'm just going to select these two, Control G to group that again. I'm just going to call this chain connect group. And you can do, but you can spend time doing. But like I say, I'm only blocking it out, so I'm not fussed that it kind of looks rubbish. So I'm just going to press Control D and duplicate that. Then I should be able to scale this in the Y, in the minus. So now that's flipped. Just roughly adjust this. And we can sort of see it's already starting to look a little bit. It's starting to make a little bit of sense. It's not making a ton of sense, but it's making sort of, you can imagine these are the motors and they're now going to drive each of these chains and so on. So what we need to figure out is how these are actually going to get mounted on. So let's make some more cubes. And what I like to do, I like to just block as much stuff out with cubes. So I don't want to be spending loads of time on things that I'm unsure about. So we're going to need some sort of bracket here. I can just bring this up here. If I just extrude, bring it down. If I press R, I can sort of scale it. Sort of give it some sort of rounded edge so it doesn't look so rough. And I'm going to do the same up here. But obviously this might interfere with that sort of chain. So we'll do the same again. This. Except this is you can pretty much do whatever you want for this sort of stage. This is how I see. So everyone concept things so differently, and everyone will have like their take on things. But this is just my sort of thing is I like to try and make things as realistic as possible and how I'd actually make it. So sort of got this rough bracket here. Let's Control D that. And we can go to our channel box editor. We can press minus and the Y and flip it. And we can use the same bracket for that. So let's align that. So I've just selected this and hold V for snap. So this means that I can snap it to any vertice. But I'm going to hold it in just that axis and snap it to here. So now these are in the same alignment. Cool, so we've got our two rough motors. And we've done our brackets. Let's do this. Get this bolt again. We want that to be on the sort of middle. I'm just going to snap these to that edge as well, so they're roughly the same. And we can change if we're making too many things that kind of look too perfect, we can always break it up afterwards. I'm just going to scale this down because we don't want the same size bolts for everything, otherwise it'll look a bit strange. So we've got our two bolts there. Maybe even those two bolts are not enough. I'm feeling maybe if I actually so I didn't explain that. Sorry, I seem to just. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make an edge loop. So I'm going to select this, my shape, and I want to make a cut here and extrude this out. So I'm going to select multi-cut, and this allows me to cut across my geometry. Most of the time you'll ever use it for using edge loops. So if you hold Control, wherever you put it, it will create a sort of edge loop. And this will only work if your geometry is got good edge flow, because it won't find the sort of edge loop. But as it is, it does find the edge loop. So I'm just going to make an edge loop here, deselect it, and I'm going to go around to the other one, select my object, go to multi-cut, and I'm going to do the same again. I've not done it aligned because I don't want it to be like perfect. I'm going to select my faces, And you have to select extrude. You can select thickness. And what we can do, because when you do that, you can see it's sort of a bit wonky. So if you press R and you scale it in that axis, it straightens it all out. And we're just roughly, so I'm going to do it the same for the other one. I'm going to press Control E, pull it out. I'm going to press R to flatten it off. You can see we've got this sort of, it's leaning up here. Don't really like that, so I'm just going to select those two, press R, and scale it flat. Then do the same for the other bit. Select these two, press R, scale it so it's flat. So now we've got these sort of brackets. Maybe we can make it, let's try and make them not look so. No, we can worry about that. So let's make add a couple extra bolts. Not too keen on how thick that is, so let's select the face. Maybe bring it up like that. Put a bolt at the end there. These bolts are just rough placement holders. We might not even use bolts, but it means that it just shows that we're going to put something there. So even now you can sort of see this is starting to make a little bit of actual fairly decent sense. If we just go back to our mood board, let's have a look at what else we got. So we've got these. So because I'm not following this, this was just the thing that sprung to mind. It'd be kind of cool to do, but I'm not modeling this. I'm just kind of creating my own thing. So we've got our rough motors, and we can use these motors as a reference later on to build our high-res models. So we've got all these bits here. So let's do our battery. It's tough to think where our battery would go. So if we just make a cube again, just scale this up. And I'm just going to roughly scale it to sort of that battery sort of size. So we'll get all like proper sizes and stuff once we do it. We're just trying to get a rough idea of how I'm just going to put this all together. So let's imagine that this is a battery, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to soften these edges. If I select my edges, if I just drag and select all of them, then I can use my bevel, and you can see what the bevel does. It bevels the edges, and you can change your fraction, and that changes the amount of beveling it does. So obviously that we don't want too much. Just making a rough battery sort of shape, and we can change the segments. And so we've got some rounded edges here. We don't need to change any of this, or the mitring, or the chamfer. We can just leave this as it is. And what we can do now, as we sort of put this together, we can sort of figure out our positions of stuff slightly better. anything on this. And I'd like to have my other, because I want 2 batteries on this, so it keeps it fairly evenly weighted. And obviously it doesn't have to be the same battery, so we can have a different one here, I think. It's going to be kind of, imagine it's the apocalypse, right? And you don't have everything left, and you've just managed to find an electric skateboard and a broken chainsaw and a broken samurai sword. So that's the kind of situation we're in. So, like I said before, we've got our batteries. So our second thing would be we need to figure out how we're actually going to fix these to it as well. So we've got these sort of brackets. Probably will change these brackets. I'm not too keen on them. But also looking at the size of the handle, these batteries are tiny, so and these are all quite small. Just make sure we so actually, if we look at the size of that handle, I think these motors would be pretty big. If they're going on skateboard wheels, this handle's not very big. So we'll get the correct sizes and stuff when we actually start to model it. And we'll probably still end up changing the scale of some things. It's just whatever looks nice. But the closer we get things to the correct size, the realistic things will start to look. Scale plays a very important part in realism. Albeit we're doing some sort of weird chainsaw sword. It's not really... Well, I saw model things that you can make this, so this is almost more of a concept slash. You could probably actually make this, I think. I don't see why you couldn't, because this is just how I build stuff, so it's more of a real concept. You never know, one day I might get around to actually building it. Cool, so we've got that. We can sort of figure out these brackets a little bit better later. And let's make another cube. Just trying to think how I want to attach these batteries. So I don't want it to look absolutely perfect. I want it to kind of be a mess as well. So I have to figure out the best sort of so let's just select our faces. And let's try to think what we could do here. So if we just pull this across here. How'd that look in a sort of tray? I'm not too keen on that. I'm kind of more inclined to do something like a brace. So I'm just going to select my edges, go to multi-cut, just gonna make some edges here. Select my face, Control E. So let's just pull this all the way around. We'll worry about that afterwards. So this is why we do this. It's to figure out everything. So just use my multi-cut again. Sorry. This is supposed to be like a intro to modeling as well, if you haven't already done it. So I'm trying to talk through as much as I can without forgetting. So we've got these two faces now, and we can select bridge, and that does exactly what it does. It will bridge the gap. If we select our vertices, we can roughly pull that out. I know it's not perfect, but I just want to get this blocked. So I'm just going to make some cuts here. And on this side. Because I don't even know what I'm making here, so I'm just making something what could be completely random. So this is another opportunity to figure out what I'm going to make, because then I can now, once this is done, I can sort of refine my sort of mood board, and I can find something that's like this, then I use that as a reference. I'm sure something like this does exist. Even if it's like literally a battery tray holder, which I'm sure that's exactly what this is I'm probably making. So we can pull this down. And so we've got that battery tray holder there. And let's set the face on that side, the face on that side. Press Control E, set the thickness, and Control E again to do it again. And I'm just going to I'm just going to press R actually, and I'm going to scale it in one direction, so it's sort of like that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to have probably something going over the top, or maybe that's how it's supposed to be, but it's broken, so I can't use that. So we've got this battery tray holder. Now we've got to try and figure out how we're going to attach this to the blade. So we can't have everything going through the same bolts, because that looks silly. So maybe actually, how would we attach this? So I would think we just want to attach it here. No, we do. You don't want to attach it to the bottom, so So let's try this. So I would think we would probably have to make something bespoke for this because this is. So if I press Control E. I'm just going to extrude it out a little bit. I'm going to select the edge. I'm just going to pull that out like that. Now I'm going to select. I'll press Q to hide the manipulator. Press Control E. I'm just going to pull that up. We've just got this rough brackety sort of shape. So a lot of this is I'm just making it up as I go along. So I'm just going to go multi-cut and do the same again here. Deselect it, select my face, Control E. Just going to pull that out a little bit. I'm just going to pull that out there. I'm going to select my faces. Just Q to hide that. Press Control E. I'm just going to pull this up here. So now I've got this sort of rough sort of battery holder sort of thing. We've got it held in there, but we haven't quite got it in place here. So maybe we even do the same for that side. So we're just concepting, so you're not doing anything right or wrong at this stage. Just going to select my faces and do the same again. Because we're building something like very bespoke to the shape right now, so the more we do that, the less likely something like this probably actually exists in real life. So we might actually have to sort of build this sort of frame as a sort of a bodge job sort of thing that maybe he's welded bits together. We can sort of figure that out when we get to it, but as long as we get the shape and figure this all out, because that's all we're doing at the moment, it's just figuring it out. Let's scale this bolt out. I know there's a gap there, but let's not worry about that for now. And we're going to have to build, so I'm going to press Control D and duplicate that down. So we don't want to use the same bolts, but like I say, these are just placeholders for stuff that we will create. So we've got these battery holders. If we start to look at it, it's starting to look quite cool. Even though I'm just making it up as we go along. Like I've not planned this. The only thing that I've had is the mood board. So we're just gonna let's just scale this battery down. And we can decide on battery sizes later or something like that. We can have something that's maybe stuffed in there or something. We'll figure all that stuff out later. So I'm gonna group these, Control G. I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to make sure that I group everything, because it becomes very like already we've not done loads, but we're already getting loads of like poly cylinder stuff like that. So we want to sort of keep this as tidy as possible. So I'm just going to Control G that, put it in the group. Battery bracket. Bolts. Cool, so we've got everything. What are these? These are bolts, so I'm just going to middle mouse click, drop them under bolts. We'll just call this real blade. Control G. And we'll call this the chain sword. Cool. So we've tidied everything up here, and we're sort of getting a really good idea of what we want to build. Obviously, it's probably going to change from the scale, because think about it, these batteries are probably much larger. But we can get the sort of blocking out as best as we can. Like I say, it's just like a fantasy sort of thing anyway, so it's not like it has to be real, as long as it looks good. But I would think that these batteries would need to be a lot larger. We'll worry about that another time. Cool. So there are a couple other things that we got to do as well. So let's make another cylinder, and let's rotate this round. If you hold V, sort of snap it to that point there. Obviously these, if these were together, like it'd be wobbly, so we need to make a sort of brace here. So we're definitely going to need something in there. So maybe you can add something in between. We'll come to that point. Select these bolts, press Control D, and snap that to there. Don't really want that to show, because that's just like, imagine that's like a big washer, a bit of steel pipe, just so they don't flop around. And we can do that further down as well if we want. Cool, so it's starting to come together. Got this sort of rough chainsword thing. Let's bring this down. I seem to have adjusted that. Oh, those, bring that up. Because our chain's going to go around there. Powered by these two motors. So we're probably going to need some sort of, I guess, some circuitry or something like that. I guess, probably, if you're just doing it very basic, I guess you would only need some sort of switch or something. So where would we? Do we want to put it like a trigger? How do we want to do this? So if we hold the sword like that, we probably want this. Let's make another cube. Do we want to add a sort of we could add a sort of a knuckle guard. I just don't want to be making it too, it's already going to be quite crazy as it is, so if you're holding it like that, so I don't want to attach it to the handle really. I feel you kind of want, if I was to do this, it would be easier just to make a switch on the handle, right? But just gonna just say I'm not even bothering about topology or anything like that, or making it all connect. I just want to get the shape. So imagine a bit of bent metal. Duplicate that round. Do we want like a sort of switch thing? Maybe it might be easier just to put just a basic switch. I'm not too keen on the idea of sort of a trigger thing. In fact, do you know what? I actually think let's delete that. I'm not too keen on it. So I kind of like the idea of probably have another bracket here. Let's just duplicate that. Just blocking it out. And when I do this, I tend to just use cubes and squares. Nothing amazing. Just so I can get a decent idea of what I'm going to do. So we've got this. Bracket. So I was thinking something extremely as basic, because if I was doing this, I wouldn't do it too complicated. I would probably have a small bracket there. This feels way too small. So then, I'm just going to use the same cube. Then I'm thinking just like one of those. Just like one of those sort of toggle on and off switches. Just so you can like get it with your thumb. Then you've got so if we pretend that there's a switch there. And let's make another cylinder. I'm just going to go to my tribute editor and turn my subdivisions all the way down. So I'm just going to pretend this is the wires and stuff. So if you've got the switch here and the battery power, so the battery power is obviously going to have to go to, we'll have to make some sort of loom. And that's like a wiring connection sort of thing. So, you know, it's actually, we can start. Let's start from the motor, I think. Well, we could probably use a spline from here, but like I say, this is going to be your first sort of modeling sort of thing, so I just want to try and do everything with polys, nothing clever or anything. So I'm just going to press Control E, rotate that around. So kind of looks, just Control E. So I'm just going to rotate it around like this. Is just, don't worry if it looks awful. It's not supposed to look great. It's supposed to give you the idea of what you want. Also, you would probably, because when we do these wires, we will do them with splines and stuff and make them a lot nicer. But we're just trying to figure out what we're going to see. Because to me, that's a... I would probably... see, and every time we like do something like this, we're gonna have some sort of cable tidy or something, and it's all these tiny little details we'll eventually go into. But I think we can put some sort of wiring loom in here. So I know it's pretty naff at the moment, but let's just Control D that, and we can bring that across. If we flip it in the Y, we actually don't want to flip it in the Y because we are already up. So let's just so don't worry that if this is getting messy. So we've got some basic wiring. Let's go into here or something. Obviously the wiring is going to be a little bit more complex than that when we actually do it, model it. Because we actually have wires coming out of there as well. So I should Control D that. So when you're doing stuff like this, it's the quicker you get this sort of blocked out, the sooner you can sort of start modeling stuff. So I'm just gonna duplicate that and hold right click and click face. I'm just gonna delete all those faces. Let's just delete all that. This is not the best wiring in the world, but we're not doing that at the moment. We'll figure out our wiring afterwards. Oh, so let's Control D. Just bring that across there. And we can imagine that's our sort of really nasty, rough wiring. We got our switch, chainsword. So that's funny. We got some stuff that we need to figure out, which is this sort of bracket. Because it's not on anything at the moment, so we need to make sure that we're actually got this attached to something. We can have all our wiring tucked in here. How would we attach that? We could just have Control D. Could just be like this. So that is one frame. So how are we? So I do want something, so if I Control D. So I do want something that's holding these batteries in. I suppose that's a bit. So I think this would be some sort of rubbery sort of band on a clip. Like I said, I didn't even put this in. This is not even in my mood board, but it's something that when I go start the next stage, so I'll revisit the mood board and try and find all these things that I've sort of imagined. So we've got this rough clip thing. So I'm thinking, let's just use that and pretend that's some sort of no. Let's just go back to cylinder because it'll be easier. Just going to scale this down. Go to my attribute. Change my subdivision axis because I don't need lots. I'm just thinking some sort of hook here. Something that I can attach it to. So we can find something that's a bit more correct. But for now, let's I'm not even bothered that it's kind of doing weird stuff. Just select my edges. So I know it's a rough disgusting looking hook, but we can now concept things. We can look for stuff that we're going to need that for. So we've got this bracket, we've got our motors. Cool, so I think for the sort of base concept and blocking out, we've got something that's reasonably decent. Obviously it's basic shapes, and we've got the sort of size I think that we want. What we can probably do, let's tidy this all up first, and maybe we can just drop it in. So just call those spaces. Obviously we can end up, we're probably going to be modeling a lot more than what we see here. We're going to have to model so many details and stuff, so. Let's just put this all under the battery bracket. So I'm just gonna Control G that. I'm gonna go chain sword concept blocking. Cool. And what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna put this where, because on our track shot, I'm gonna put it on top and see what it looks like. So I'm just gonna export this out and import this into our I'm actually gonna put that under sword group. So now everything there is so. Oh yeah, that's probably why I had it lower. Because the plan is to sort of not do any paint. So let's move all this down here. Let's deselect that. So we want the sword covered as much as we can. I'll see. We can adjust this sort of this chainsaw blade to how we want, but I forgot that was the reason we were doing that. No bad. So I'll just hide that. Let's readjust these. It actually makes no difference really. I can't actually. I think I'm. We'll see how it looks. Oh, I think I moved it because this one was at such an angle, but I'm not sure it matters so much because we're probably still going to have to change all this stuff because don't forget we've got this chain. It's going to have the blades, and the blades are going to come around here, so we need to sort of figure that out at some point, but for the rough concept, this should be absolutely fine. Let's bring... I think it looks cooler actually, like that. It actually looks a little bit more like a chainsaw. We can build spaces and stuff in that. Cool. So now I'm just going to export this out and bring this into our tracked scene, and I'm just going to have a look at it. Cool. So if you did the previous sort of tutorial where we did the match move and stuff, we've already got this sword tracked. So you can see here, we've got a sword. It's looking pretty good. We've got a scary purge guy. So go to perspective. Let's file, import, and I exported out my sword concept as an OBJ, so I'm just going to import that in. And we've got all this junk that's come with it, so you can just delete all those selection sets. So I'm just gonna go shading, default shaded, so it's all default shaded. Just gonna unhide my sword handle, and I probably should have let's find a bell. So I'm just gonna I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go. I probably should have done it as an MA, but let's do it. Let's select a mesh to separate. Fortunately, that's. Let's go select. Show selection highlighting. Made a bit of a mess here, sorry. So just hide that now. And I probably should have done a lineup, but it doesn't matter. We'll do this when we get to the point of doing this. We'll do this properly. It's just so we can sort of see. So I'm just gonna go to that point. So I've pressed insert, change pivot point, hold V to snap. And I'm just going to snap it to that point, press F. And I'm just going to... This was a bad way of doing this, sorry. But we're only doing it so we can just have a look. When we get to the point of actually doing this properly, we will take a much more intelligent approach instead of just doing it like this. So we snap to the point. For now, that's probably fine for now. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to drop my sword under the control. So now that concept sword has all the animation on it. Hide all these because that's the actual sword. Unhide my concept. I'm going to go to my camera. And now you can see this sort of chainsword. I think that's going to look pretty cool. We're going to see, it's going to be kind of nice if we do see in there, so maybe we have to add some stuff in there as well. But that's kind of, that's going to, when we get to the point and it's all modeled, textured and rendering, this is going to look really cool. Obviously the size of things might change because those batteries look really small. The motors look alright, but the batteries look really, really small. And we can see, and we've achieved most of what we wanted to achieve, covering up the sword. It's just this bit. This is gonna look really cool once we've got, because we'll do the chain animation as well, and it'll be spinning. We'll figure out what we can do in the middle. But yeah, I think that's looking pretty cool. I think we're probably done with the sort of concepting. I think maybe we can go back and refine it. I'm quite happy with how that is, because I think a lot of the other stuff is going to come from, maybe we should need to add something in the middle here, because we've got the sword. Would it be crazy to add a blade in there? In fact, actually thinking about it, one sec. Oh, we do see in there. I'm gonna say we don't need to paint any of that out because we'll rotate that anyway. Just those bits. So I think we've spent quite a long. I think we've got the concept blocking out pretty good. There's the handle. So it's looking really good. Cool. So I think it's pretty good for a quick sort of concept and sort of just making it up as we go along. Maybe you can go back and have a look in the middle. Maybe what I could put in here. Like I say, you may come up with something completely different, maybe not the same as me. So I'll probably have a think what I could put in the middle here. I kind of like it that it's open, because imagine if you were to like using it, you wouldn't want It probably wouldn't go through too many things. Or we can just block it off, I think. Or we could add a third one in there. I don't really want to add a third one in there, to be honest. Or we can make the blade go all the way to the tip. But yeah, I think we're pretty much done. So I'm probably going to go back to my mood board and find things that I've added and then add them to my mood board, and yeah, then the next tutorial we will start modeling up bit by bit, probably with the chainsaw bar, so we'll probably do this bit first. Cool, so I can't think of anything else that we can do now. You can continue concepting. I don't like to spend too much time. Well, there's not time, but I don't want to put too much detail into this because I'm not going to have to redo most of it anyway. But we get the idea, like the wires, we can make those look way better afterwards. Cool. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this first tutorial, and sort of, it's not hard surface modeling, but it's the first stage of what you need to do when you're doing it anyway. Like whenever you're hard surface modeling something, you need to block it out first, so you get this sort of idea. So you're not just modeling something really nice and you get to a point that's kind of like, oh, it's a little bit strange. So what I'll probably do in the next one, I'm going to find out all the measurements and sizes of the batteries and motors. Then we're going to adjust it in the next one, actually. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.